Good afternoon, Patriots, and welcome to the 43rd audio chat on the Q News Patriot Rumble Channel series. I am the Q News Patriot coming to you with financial advisor and precious metals expert, Kirk Elliott. My name is SG Anon.
How are you?
Doing excellent, my friend. In the period of time that we're living in right now, and thank you very much for coming on, Dr. Kirk, there is a tremendous amount of growing uncertainty about the future of the petrodollar and about a transition period and a changeover that we are clearly living through. And on this program, one of the operating suppositions that we utilize, and it is worth noting that it has to be, suppositional basis for the present moment, is that there is a changeover occurring in the positive direction. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that the death of any system, whether it's for our benefit or for our detriment, that process itself is going to be painful and unpleasant regardless. And I think that we've seen a great deal of acceleration, specifically as it pertains to NATO, military operations worldwide, escalation of conflict, and really squeezing, almost like a strategic squeezing of the financial markets around the world. So, thank you for coming back. Do you care to give us a deep dive on what you've seen in recent days and weeks for Patriots out there to kind of get a good flavor of where we may be and maybe where we're headed in the next 3 to 4 months?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter almost what topic you're talking about. There's political, economic, social, spiritual, and they're all kind of spiraling downward right now. And to this big, what I would call it, global communist collective of everything. And we talked about this for decades, like a one world government. But this is really where we're headed. I mean, honestly. So with central banking, for example, we've got the SWIFT system, which is what Biden, when Russia attacked Ukraine, the first thing that Biden did is he said, "Hey, Putin, you're out of the SWIFT system. No more international bank wires coming into your country, trying to starve out the population of Russia." So Putin goes to China, says, "Hey, Xi, we we got kicked out of the SWIFT system." He said, "Oh, that's okay. We've got our own called CIPS or SIPS, and that's what we're using with the BRICS nations." So, yeah, didn't work. Biden's plan didn't work. But what it did do is it really solidified and amplified an existing relationship that Russia and China had because they've been part of the BRICS nations for a long time. But now it's like really connected at the hip politically, economically, with one goal to de-dollarize the world, right? They want to be the manufacturing superpower, the military superpower, the economic superpower, all of it, right? And so what do? So I'm just giving a little bit of a history backdrop here to bring us up to where we are today and why this is so important. Because in August of last year, Putin said, "Hey, we're going to de-dollarize the world. It's irreversible and it's our objective." And so how did they do that? Petrodollar. They attacked it because on January 1st, then, a couple months after that meeting, they added Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Iran, which is an important one to me, Egypt, Ethiopia, Argentina, into the BRICS nation. So now they've got 6 of the 9 largest oil producers in the world trading for oil in their own currencies. And SG, this is like 70% of the world's population. It's not some small bilateral trade agreement between 2 dinky little countries. There's literally 70% of the world's population that are not using the dollar. So that's how Putin could be so smug and saying, we're going to do this. So the second thing that really ticked off Russia was when we froze their assets. Well, this isn't an uncommon thing for a country to do if they're, hate the other country. So we're going to freeze your assets and we're going to starve you out. You kind of got rid of the SWIFT thing, and so didn't make it a big deal. So now we're going to freeze your assets that we control. Of those assets, there was hundreds of millions of dollars of gold that the United States took. Well, so a few weeks ago, Janet Yellen basically told Putin, it's like, "Hey, Putin, remember when we froze your assets and we took your hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold? We're going to give it to Ukraine." It's like, oh my word. Of all the countries on earth that they could give Russia's gold to, it's the one that they're fighting against, amplifying the geopolitical tensions, right? Which is going to strike more fear. into hearts and minds of people. But it's not just America that did that. The European Union out of Brussels told Russia, it's like, hey, since like the early 1900s, you have like 91.5 tons of gold that's Romania's, and you've got it. We want you to give it back. Well, this is where I'm not going to say it, but because it's a family-friendly show here, but Medvedev, who used to be the prime minister or the president of Russia before Putin, who's now some kind of bigwig muckety muck in the Russian government, said, "Hey, European Union, F you. We're not going to do that." So tension, creating fear. But where this has led to is, I believe Iran is almost a proxy for the economic warfare going on against America. So remember, SG, a few weeks ago, this is my theory, but I don't think that Iran shooting the drones off at Israel was necessarily a function of the longstanding, since Isaac and Ishmael in the Old Testament, religious differences between the Arabs and Jews, right? They've been fighting ever since then. So I think, though, that this is more economic in nature, because when Iran joined the BRICS nations, what do they have? They have oil. And so what causes gold and silver to go up? Fear, conflict. And so what does China have? Well, officially, through the World Gold Council, they have about 5,000 tons of gold. That number doesn't add up to me at all, because China is the largest producer miner of gold on the planet. And how much of it do they sell? Zero. They're also the largest purchaser of gold on the planet. That doesn't add up to 5,000 tons, right? So unofficially, it's estimated they have about 30,000 tons of gold. So here's where this, I believe, is this paradigm shifting moment of power from the West to the East, and China's flexing, and they're using Iran as a proxy to create fear, because when you have fear, gold and silver go up. So why do I say that? Because these stupid little paper drones, whatever they are, I mean, there were 300 of them that were flying low, they're flying slow, they have lights on them, because we watched it on the news for like 4 hours. It's like, when are these things going to get there? You know, they're slow. But then, of course, they hit the Iron Dome in Israel, and they're all blown to smithereens, right? But then people started thinking, what else are they going to attack? They're going to attack Israeli and U.S. targets all over the world, and this is fear, fear, fear. Well, that causes gold and silver to go up. And remember, when the West, London and New York, had control of the majority of precious metals on Earth, they wanted to suppress the price, SG, because anytime gold goes up, it's a slap in the face to their central bank currency, fiat-based money. So they didn't want that. So there's always been price suppression. But what does China want? The absolute opposite, because they're amassing tens of thousands of tons of gold to back their central bank digital currency that's coming. And so if they create enough fear and enough supply disturbances, the price is going to go up, and they could actually win a battle against America without ever firing a bullet. Because what happened the day before those drones went over? On Friday, the drones started flying on Saturday. On Friday, the Western banks shorted 1.2 billion ounces of silver, shorted it, which means if the price goes up and you short something, you lose money hand over fist, right? So to put that into perspective, the amount of silver mined globally is 800, it's 800 million ounces. Well, they shorted 1.2 billion ounces in an afternoon. That's a lot of shorting. So what did China do? Policy-wise, they told all of their citizens in China, hey, start buying silver. So if they all just bought 1 ounce of silver, what does that mean? It means they're taking up all of the supply for one whole year. But they don't have to buy all 1 ounce of silver, because India has already committed to buying 66% of the silver production from the mines in 2024. So here we have India, China, Iran, all working in concert to actually squeeze the banks and the Western banks in London and New York into a big, huge mess. Because if you really want to basically win an economic battle against the country, create fear, and destroy their banking system. This is what I think is happening. But now the banks, boy, SG, this is where it starts to get even more squirrely, because I don't know if it was the last show we did or the one before, but we were talking about some of the implications in the banking industry from Silicon Valley Bank going under. Well, back then, I had said, this is not an isolated event. This is going to happen again. But because why do banks go out of business? Because they have more withdrawals coming out than they have deposits going in, and they run out of money. It's pretty much bottom line. So under Biden's economy, we've got lowering wages, increasing unemployment, higher taxes, higher inflation, people spend less. They have to pull money out just to survive. So when you couple that with malinvestment, their investments are the same thing that you and I would invest in, which commercial real estate's the big one, just collapsing, right? So they don't have enough money. They're undercapitalized, more withdrawals coming out. That's why those 5 banks failed. But then it stopped. And there wasn't any more bank failures for like a year. And people were applauding the Fed. It's like, man, whatever you did, it was awesome. You stopped the bank runs, right? But all they did was put a Band-Aid on this big, huge gaping wound of undercapitalization. They didn't fix that. They put a Band-Aid on it. How did they put a Band-Aid on? They provided stimulus money called the Bank Temp Funding Program, which is just stimulus money that went into failing banks so you could basically bail them out before they had to go into FDIC receivership. So that program sunset on March 11th. It expired. It's gone. So after March 11th, the first bank that gets in a capitalization issue is going to bypass any kind of stimulus money and just go into FDIC receivership. See, this is why they didn't want that to happen before, because prior to Silicon Valley, FDIC had around 1.7% of all deposits insured. That's it. Forget about your $250,000 insurance limit if there's a run on the banks. So after those 5 banks failed, which were Signature Bank, Silicon Valley, Silvergate, Credit Suisse, and First Republic, that went down to 0.74%. So now we're sitting there. No banks really failed during that time because they were getting stimulus money, but stimulus money ended, and Republic Bank in Philly just went under last weekend. They went into FDIC receivership because there was no stimulus money. You couldn't stop it from going into FDIC receivership. Here's the problem with this. So I was looking over the numbers. That bank has $6 billion of assets, $4 billion of deposits. And what did FDIC cover? 667 million is what they had to cough up. So what does that 667 take care of? Everybody with bank balances from 0 to 250,000. They got made whole. But there's 4 billion in deposits. They paid off 667 million. That leaves about 3.3 billion left. What happened to it? Vaporized. It's gone because that's not insured. So once these commercial real estate companies or these wealthy individuals who have more than 250 in their banks or companies realize what happened, I think this is the spark that could cause a run on the banks, because research just came out yesterday that there's over 258 banks that are financially stressed that should strike concern into people that could be ready for FDIC receivership. They could go under. So it's not just 5 like we saw before. There's a lot of banks this time that are undercapitalized. And now that there's no federal stimulus money coming in to save them, I think you could see a big bank run and banks failing. However, SG, I think this is part of the plan, because why in the world would you want, or anybody, I'm not just saying you, but people out there in this country, would they want central bank digital currency, which is the ability to cut you off from buying or selling if your ideology doesn't match up with theirs? That's the words of the World Economic Forum and Bank for International Settlements. That's what they want. Nobody would want that. But if the crisis is bad enough, people will give up their freedoms. So now you've got a banking crisis, people's money going away. People will give up almost anything in exchange for that perceived financial peace or any kind of peace. Well, they're making it easier for people to swallow this, because just this week in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the World Economic Forum is meeting. And you know what? They're changing the definition or the name of central bank digital currency. They're taking the word central bank digital off of it. And they said, you know what? We've been working on this long enough. This is now the new norm when people are used to digital money. We're just going to call it currency. So preconditioning us for something new that we're not going to be afraid of, because it's just currency. It's just digital currency. Look, everyone's used to Venmo and PayPal and your Apple Wallet and stuff like that. It's not a big deal. This is just currency. So they're getting rid of the negative term, calling it something that people are used to, thinking that's the new normal. And people will, sadly, not your listeners, not the people that I talk to, but most of America will just say, okay, that's cool. Got a new digital currency. You know, that's normal. It's clean, it's fast, it's efficient, blah, blah, blah. I think that's where we're headed. And that's why they're letting these things happen for bank failures, because people will willingly give up their freedoms, SG, in exchange for that perceived peace.
I really appreciate you taking the thorough overview. And whenever you and I get together on air, I think that's something that we do a very good job of together, because it really is about understanding the context, but also the future implications in a 50,000 foot overview kind of way. And that's really important as we look at what's happening with bank deposits right now, and different harassment that's occurred of conservative groups and Republican aligned and MAGA aligned groups in the financial system, the deplatforming, right? I think even Cash Patel, excuse me, around 6 to 8 months ago, launched something called, I think it was Revere Payments, which is supposed to be a payment processing provider alternative that helps to preserve some of that autonomy and some of that right to privacy that I think everybody out there, and especially listeners on this show, are going to put at very near the top of their financial priorities list. Now, that being said, the other thing that struck me about what you were just overviewing a moment ago is that is an extraordinarily extreme description. I shouldn't say extreme. That's maybe not the right word. Adept description is maybe a better way of a multi-angular, large-scale economic warfare operation. Right. This is you have nation states cooperating inside of internal trading blocks to position themselves in such a way to basically silently attack the fuel valuation system, the digital currency system, the fiat money system that exists in the Western world. And I've got a question for you on that as well, because you were talking about the shorts on precious metal, silver, excuse me, in particular. 1.2 billion ounces, I believe, is what you said was what they shorted, and that's an extraordinary number. I mean, it's almost an incomprehensible number to take a vast bet against. And you have China simultaneously leveraging its population base to countermand that shorted position, and then you have Iran essentially, slapping Israel with a glove, if we can use the metaphor. But really, it drives more of an economic fright, as you highlighted and pointed out. So, if I can ask, first of all, what does that do? That multi-angular economic warfare picture that we've painted there, what does that do to the military and industrial base within the NATO countries? And then separately from that, what does that do specifically to commodities like oil, natural gas, precious metals, and so forth?
So whenever there's fear, whenever there's uncertainty, turbulence, turmoil, change, gold and silver go up. So does oil, right? Because a lot of the conflict is in the Middle East, and whenever you have war, whenever you have conflict, those three things in particular go up: gold, silver, and oil. Now, so a lot of the silver use that we see for industrial demand is aerospace and Department of Defense. It's missiles, it's torpedoes, it's the silver oxide batteries that are needed in those things. So Silver Institute basically has been around since the, kind of like the Manhattan Project timeframe, to market silver, promote it, but yet somehow oddly keep the price down because it's needed for the military complex, right? So this is why when silver was hitting close to $30 an ounce, they shorted 1.2 billion ounces. It came down to 27. They in times of war, they needed that price to stay lower, right? But now that China is seeing what they're doing, they can say, okay, every citizen start buying silver. They want the supply to go away because imagine if you're the Defense Department, you need silver to win a war for your ammunition, or if you're Sony, Samsung, LG, and you need to make LCD TV, you can't do it without the silver components in it, which is not much, but they still need it. They can't have a finished product without it. So now what do? If there's no supply, the price goes through the roof. The people who have shorts lose money hand over fist. See, this is where political disturbances ultimately are going to end up in our economic reality, right? So I would say this to me reeks of economic warfare, and we get to take massive advantage of it. But it's bigger than, it's really quite bigger than that to me. When you look at one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto, for example, is, oh, let me just pull it up here. It's Karl Marx, plank number 5 of communism is centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and exclusive monopoly. Well, that's a central bank, right? So what we're seeing now is this global march towards communism. We're not necessarily a representative republic like people think that we are, because when you look at the Communist Manifesto, the 10 planks that make up communism, number 1, abolition of property and land and application of all rents and land to public purpose. Well, do we have abolition of property and land? What's property? Your bank accounts?
Eminent
What about
domain.
eminent domain? Our land. What if you don't pay your property taxes? Even if you own your house outright, SG, if you don't pay your property taxes, it goes to a tax lien auction and you're done. Number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. That would be the death tax. I mean, I had a client once inherited a very large farm from the parents that was passed down from multi-generational farm, huge value. Well, they have to pay a 55% death tax. It's like, man, these people got inherited of an amazing farm. They had to pay 55% of it in taxes. They had to sell their farm because they didn't have the money to pay the tax. So confiscation of all the property of all immigrants and rebels. Who are rebels in America now? How about Students for Life of America?
Catholic mothers.
Catholic mothers. They're all been considered domestic terrorist groups, right? And so you could shut down their bank accounts. This is ridiculous. I mean, we've been debanked. I know so many people that have, lost their right to free speech, and they've been deplatformed. And that's actually plank number 6, centralization of the means of communication and transport by the hands of the state. Well, if they don't like what you say, they're going to deplatform you. They're going to debank you. Number 5 was the central bank. It's like, man, we're up to number 6, and we've checked mark all of them. 7 is extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. So remember, during Obama timeframe, AIG went down and General Motors was having much trouble. The government took over those 2 industries, insurance and automotive. Okay, so there you go. Number 8, equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies. That's just simply unions. Number 9, combination of agriculture and manufacturing industries to basically abolish the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population. They want to pull all people into these super cities, right? And get people, and they're demonizing people who want to live rural, saying that they're crazy conservatives, right? Why would anybody want to live out in the country, right? Bring everybody into the city where they can control them, because you don't want to have mass transit and people driving into the suburbs and everything else, all part of Agenda 2030. And then lastly, free education for all children in public schools. Free education, man, they're just wiping away student debt, right? So pretty much all 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto are alive and well in America. And so the biggest thing to me, though, this isn't just an American thing. This is a global move towards global communism, because central banks are wanting now, with SWIFT system, interconnecting all banks in all countries and building this bridge with exchange rates and different currencies and different banks and different people. So it all can combine into one. To me, this is global communism. And under global communism, they don't want to have everybody equally wealthy. They want to have everybody equally poor and dependent on the super state. And this is where I see this headed. And it's a grim picture, but there's things that you can do to get out of that system, right? Which is why we talk about gold and silver, because if you're not digital, if you're not part of their unified ledger, if you're not part of some kind of a certificate where they can flip off a switch and divorce you from your money in your bank account if they don't like you, well, that's what gold and silver bring to the table, is something that's private, something that's growing, something that you could use for barter if you need to. That's why I'll keep shouting this message from the rooftop, SG, until there's nobody else listening, because it's that important.
Indeed, it is. And we're moving into a period of time now where the exposure of those manipulative forces in the background and their race against the clock, I think, for this attempted global communist coup, which is basically what you've just described and outlined, very thoroughly and with great detail. I mean, this is the do or die moment, I think, if you are in the other opponent's camp. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to try and get together with you as we were moving through the month of May towards Memorial Day specifically, and then into the summer months. We typically see great movements of significant impact worldwide in all arenas of this unusual war that we're living in. Finance is no exception during the summer months when the temperatures are a little bit more amenable to human life. And so I really appreciate you going through that. And I do have one final question,
Yeah.
and then we'll get into where people can go if they want to learn more, if they want to get involved with silver or gold or things like that. But my last question, I think, is going to center around what do we do about it from a societal sense. We know that putting ourselves into a position of safe harbor, if we're able to, especially with our investments or where we're able to allocate our various monies and resources into, that's one thing that we can do. That's an angle that some people are able to do, others are not able to do. But outside of that, we as a society, I think, are going through a period where we're having to make a fundamental decision about how we want to live and how we want to
Mhm.
exchange value with one another. And you've highlighted it at one point in time in the past, and I maybe wanted to expound upon this a little bit as we look to close off our call here today, to this idea of a state chartered bank within the United States. So,
Yeah.
ostensibly, we would have 50 examples of this if we were to replicate it with an asset-backed currency or some sort of exchange with the union internally, where the currency is seamlessly transitioned between states. Do you mind to maybe expound a little bit more on your musings about that system and about how that could be a viable option moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So the immediate thing that we should all do is allocate into physical gold or silver ourselves. I would do silver. But more of a longer term structural change to the economy and to banking is doing what Texas is doing. So Texas is voting like sometime in May, when their legislative session, to have a state chartered bank backed by gold. So they're going to have all this gold in their vault, and the University of Texas Endowment already has their gold. That's what they invest in. We should take note of that, right? So what is Texas doing? They're getting out of that federal system. They're getting away from this FedNow app on your phone, and what I believe is, in Revelation 13:17, the mark of the beast, with all this digital enslavement of you and your money, and not being able to buy or sell unless your ideology matches up with theirs. So they're pulling out. So that is a state thing, right? It's not a federal thing. So Oklahoma wants to do the same, right? I haven't seen if they're putting that bill up for vote anytime soon, like Texas is. Florida wants to do the same thing. There's already been about 7 states that have already taken the first step in that direction to make gold or silver legal tender in that states, like Louisiana, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Utah. I mean, there's numerous states that are doing that. But here, the state chartered central bank thing, how do we get that done? Because a lot of people will say, well, Kirk, we can barely scrape anything together every month. We're living hand to mouth. And so save up as much as you can to start allocating into silver. Silver is cheap, but $500 minimum, and save up until you can get to that point. But in the meantime, contact your state representatives. right? Because that's where it starts, and say, hey, Texas is getting a state chartered central bank. You better do the same in our state, or else everyone's going to want to move to Texas that cares about their finances, right? So I think state after state after state is going to start moving in this direction to get away from that federal overreach and control. And this is exciting to me because this is what the founding fathers envisioned. The founding fathers didn't want a central bank because that concentrates too much power into the hands of just that one entity, and with that comes control of people. So they wanted competition of currency. This is what federalism is all about, which is if states can do something, then the Fed has nothing to do with it. If the federal government can do it, then the states shouldn't, right? So that's the separation of powers. Can a bank be done by states? Sure, can. Used to be anyways, right? So putting money creation back into the hands of the states, you're going to have competition of currency, and getting rid of that federal control, SG, is something amazing. So outside of buying gold or silver on your own with yourself, with your IRA assets, bank brokerage accounts, whatever, start contacting your congressmen and women at the state legislature level. I mean, trying to contact a US rep from your state, they're never going to call you back. It just rarely happens. But the state ones are very responsive usually because they have smaller constituencies. So just give them a call and see if they can start sponsoring a bill to get this done. And ultimately, here's your message to them. That might make you the most popular person in the state, right? Because people are wanting this.
No, indeed. And I personally am very excited and cannot wait until we arrive at a point in our society where we have a much freer, more liberated commercial sector and a spirit of competition and laissez-faire that was always envisioned.
Yes.
Dr. Kirk, if people wish to contact you directly and learn a little bit more, where can they go to find you, sir?
So we put together a website for this show. It's KEPM, like Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. So just KEPM.com/SG, or you could just call 720-605-3900 and just say SG sent you. And then the process is, I like everyone to know what the process is. You'll talk to one of my schedulers. We've got like 20 of them, and they'll schedule a time for you to meet with one of my consultants, which will answer your questions. We'll dig deep into what your needs, your concerns, your fears, your goals are, and map out a strategy for success, given the horrible economy that we're living in, using tangible assets like silver to really protect yourself moving forward. And that's the process. It's all free. We don't charge anything for our consultations. Never have, never will, not in 29 years. So we just want to help as much as we can to take that. And you know what? Either you like what we say and you want to move forward with something, or you say, I don't really like it. And that's okay, because we want you to be at peace with your decision. Our God-given anointing and calling is to educate and equip and offer a potential solution for you to take advantage of.
My friend, I greatly appreciate you coming back on to discuss these topics and more today. I think we are all seeking to fulfill our God-given mission and our God-given purpose and anointing, as you so highlighted in this great journey that we call the Great Awakening. For the audience out there, I hope you've enjoyed our discussion today and that it's been of significant benefit to you and your personal life. This is SG Anon. I look forward to coming back with each of you again soon on air. We'll speak again very soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.